Yes guys, welcome back to another Fantasy Football Fix YouTube video. In this video, we are going to be looking at those top transfers going into game week 17. Of course, discussing what to do with Erling Haaland and the best replacements. So as always, if you are new around here, please do consider smashing that subscribe button. And if you enjoy the video, make sure you drop a like. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. So first up, as I mentioned, we need to talk about the situation with Erling Haaland. Now, we know he missed the game against Luton in game week 16 with a slight injury on the foot. Some are saying it is a stress fracture. Others are saying that he was able to walk a few days ago. So we don't really know the full diagnosis on Erling Haaland. The good thing is that they do have a midweek Champions League, which means we may get some sort of updates from Pep Guardiola. But a reminder, the deadline is this Friday and Man City play on the weekend. So I don't think we're going to get any team leaks or anything between now and the deadline, which is a little bit of a problem. But there is a lot of FPL managers already selling Erling Haaland. And that's because if he misses game week 17, they also blank in game week 18. And some may argue that game week 19 away against Everton is actually quite a tough fixture on paper for Man City now. So some are looking at maybe losing Erling Haaland for the next 3 game weeks. And I don't think many replacements come much better than Mr. Dominic Solanke. Now, I'm not going to bore you with loads of detail why you should buy Solanke because, as you could probably see on the site, he is the most bought player going into game week 17 off the back of his return against Man United. And also, he's been very consistent so far this season. Probably one of the best value forwards in the game so far. So congratulations to anyone that has already owned him so far this season. But 6.6 million, 0.52 expected goals per 90 is ridiculously good for somebody at this price bracket. 0.07 XA isn't too bad, but it's worth noting, anybody that watched the Man United game would have seen he had a few opportunities where he nearly put Semenyo through on goal. So I don't think he's necessarily just an out-and-out goal scorer in this Bournemouth team. I do still think he offers opportunities for others, and I think he's a really well-rounded FPL asset. And also when you see the big chances, 0.88, this is really solid. For anybody that doesn't really know, anything around this sort of bracket is real good territory. We've got the people like Darwin Núñez, people like Erling Haaland who are 1.5 sometimes, but those are absolute monsters in the game. When we come to the normal forwards, Dominic Solanke is right up there with one of the best in terms of the big chances. So ticking a lot of boxes. And when we look at the fixtures coming up, Luton at home, Forest away and Fulham at home. And remember, some managers only want this replacement for the next 3 game weeks. And I don't think they come much better than that. Luton at home. Luton have been fantastic this season. But away from home, they have one of the worst defensive underlying numbers. So I think that's a good fixture for Bournemouth. Away against Nottingham Forest, maybe a new manager by then, but still a great fixture. And then Fulham at home, I actually think is okay. Yes, I know Fulham are the form team right now, scoring 5 in each of their last 2 games, but I don't necessarily think that is a sustainable model. And I think Bournemouth definitely have an opportunity in that game. Now, the big thing if you are going to downgrade Erling Haaland to Solanke is that you need to remember a few things. Some people might be tempted because he's literally half the price of Erling Haaland, if not more. You're going to be sat there with 6-7 million in the bank. You need to not be tempted to invest that elsewhere in your squad because if Solanke is a 3-week move and then you need to go back to Erling Haaland, you need to make sure you got the money in the bank because he's so much cheaper than him. I know there's going to be a lot of managers that might get tempted to go buy Trent Alexander-Arnold, someone like a Trippier. They get to game week 19 and think to themselves, oh, I can't actually now afford Erling Haaland because you're not buying a forward that is the same price as him. So please do be careful if you are downgrading all the way to Solanke. But in terms of an alternative, I don't think they come much better. And also, if you're not necessarily selling Haaland and maybe you're just sideways moving one of your third forwards, this guy is up there as the best option for game week 17 and beyond. So Solanke is definitely a move that I'm considering for my FPL team. So next up, we need to take a look at some Spurs defenders that are catching the eye for a lot of managers. So here we have 3 Spurs defenders who I think are real great FPL options. And they have been all season so far, but all at slightly different price ranges. We have Udogie and Romero at 4.9 million. And then we have Pedro Porro at 5.4 million. Now going into game week 17, I think naturally a lot of the FPL community have been moving towards Pedro Porro. He is one of the most bought players going into this weekend. And I understand it because he has been so good in the games if you watch them. I think he's one of the few players in the game where those that haven't owned him have been incredibly lucky. I've watched quite a few of the Spurs games and I can't believe that he's walking away with 5 points, 4 points. Take last weekend, for example. If that last minute goal for Newcastle didn't go in, that was going to be a monster double-digit haul, but it wasn't to be for Pedro Porro. But for those that don't own him like myself, it's just another week that I need to tick off, knowing that I am going to be buying him very, very soon. So at 5.4 million, the big discussion is he worth the extra price over the likes of Udogie and Romero? Well, looking at the underlying numbers, he's right alongside Udogie in terms of expected goals per 90 at 0.11 and Pedro Porro at 0.1. Interestingly, Romero at 0.08, which is really good for a centre-back. And the reason why a lot of managers have gone to Romero is because he's the only one that scored the most goals. 3 goals scored for Romero, only 1 for Udogie that come last week, and 0 for Pedro Porro. So it's quite interesting. We always associate the attacking ability of Pedro Porro, but he's actually not scored any goals this season, and Romero is leading the way with 3. In terms of expected assists, this is where Pedro Porro comes into a league of his own. 0.26 per 90, Udogie at 0.11, and of course Romero being a centre-back has little to nothing at 0.03. So in terms of goal involvement, Udogie and Porro are right up there, but actual output is in terms of Romero. And when it comes to chance creation, Pedro Porro leads the way massively. Now, of course, because of the goals scored by Romero, he is top bonus at 0.87 per 90, Pedro Porro at 0.47, and Udogie at 0.39. But honestly, anybody that's watched the Spurs games will know Pedro Porro has literally been this close on multiple occasions to getting top bonus. I remember it against Wolves. I think he was right up there in the game week just gone. So I think that number is a little bit of a underestimated number. I think that could be honestly closer to 0.8, 0.9 if the results went their way. So I do think Pedro Porro is a sleeping giant right now, and he is going to go off very, very soon. And when we take a look at the fixtures, Nottingham Forest away, Everton at home, Brighton away, Bournemouth at home. I'm going to sit here firstly and say that I don't think you need to buy a Spurs defender with the thought of clean sheets. I don't think anyone really associates this team with clean sheets while Van de Ven has been ruled out of the team. But I do think there is some potential there. Nottingham Forest, I don't think it's a bad fixture for a clean sheet. Maybe even Everton at home. It's not at Goodison, so I think there could be a chance there. Brighton, I never fancy them, and obviously Bournemouth at home, there is potential. So first thing I'm going to say, do not be buying a Spurs defender with the expectation of clean sheets. And because of that reason, I think Pedro Porro still is the better pick by far. If you could afford it at 0.5 million more, I think you just pay it, and you know that you're buying a player that you want to own long term. He has the best predicted points over the next 4 weeks, and as I mentioned, I think he's really underperforming his numbers. Romero, on the other hand, I think is really exceeding his numbers. 3 goals with the XG that he's been posting doesn't really add up, so I don't think that's sustainable. And Udogie, I think, is great alternative, but I think that's exactly what it is, an alternative to one of the best defenders in the game. So Pedro Porro is, for me, considerably better than the other 2 Spurs defenders. And right now, probably the most priority transfer that you need to make for your defence. So last up, I want to move into some differential forwards that maybe you can consider if you don't want to go to Dominic Solanke. So I've brought up 2 players who are definitely the form strikers in the league right now, but very, very interesting strikers because they're playing for teams that I think at the start of the season we said to ourselves, these guys are not scoring goals. And Raul Jimenez in particular, a shadow of the man that he was once before. Great to see him back on the score sheet with a goal in game week 16 and obviously a brace previous to that in game week 15. So it's just more nostalgia for Raul Jimenez, and great to see after that injury that he is back in amongst the goals. Now, as I mentioned, both are differential forwards, both are below 5% owned, but this is where the real upside can be if you're not tempted by the Solanke, maybe even the Watkins, and you want to go really differential with some of your forward moves. These 2 definitely need to be a consideration for you. The value at 4.7 for Cunha and 5.2 for Raul Jimenez is fantastic. Just to give you an update, Cunha has currently scored 5 goals this season, Raul Jimenez 4, but both of those have come very recent for these players. And the XG has been good, 0.28 XG for Raul Jimenez, 0.25 XG per 90 for Cunha. So solid underlying numbers. And I also need to note, Willian with a current hamstring injury means that Raul Jimenez may become the penalty taker for Fulham. We saw that when he was at at Wolves, he's a brilliant penalty taker. So he could also add penalties to his game, which is a real plus side. And in terms of expected assists, 0.16 for Cunha, 0.14 for Raul Jimenez. So the underlying numbers for chance creation for both of these are better than that of Dominic Solanke's. And they're often real well-rounded assets, kind of similar to what we see of maybe like a Gabriel Jesus, for example. Goal scorers, but also adding creativity to their game. And at these price points, I think they are awesome picks and guaranteed minutes. No competition for either of these. They are the number one forward in their respective teams. And the big chances are good. 0.4 per 90 for Cunha, 0.36 for Raul Jimenez. I think the numbers are great. The predicted points aren't up there with the likes of Dominic Solanke, but they're still really decent. Now, when we take a look at the fixtures, this is probably where it scares a lot of people off. Wolves have West Ham away, Chelsea at home, Brentford away, Everton at home. Now, firstly, I need to tell you, I am a Chelsea fan, and that game is not a problem for Wolves. They definitely will be in that game 100%. Do not fear that game. In terms of the rest, Brentford away with all their injuries, I don't think we need to look at that fixture as difficult as what it once was. And Everton at home. I know Everton have been in great form, but I don't think they're not Barcelona, for example. When we take a look at Fulham, Newcastle away obviously is a tough game, but that'll be off the back of a midweek fixture against AC Milan. Could we see tired legs at Newcastle and without Kieran Trippier? Don't think it's as bad as what it once was. Burnley at home, a great fixture. Bournemouth away, still an okay fixture, followed by Arsenal at home. So the fixtures aren't the best. They're not as good as Dominic Solanke's, and I do think Dominic Solanke is still the route to go. But if you're looking for a differential forward, I spoke about Cunha last week. I still think both of these are fantastic. I probably would just lean towards Cunha as my pick, but honestly, if Raul Jimenez continues in the form that he's in, maybe we are going to see the return of Raul Jimenez that we had years ago. And if that is the case, he was essential back then, and he may become even more essential at 5.2 million. So guys, that is going to wrap up today's Game Week 17 Top Transfers video. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if you can drop a like and smash that subscribe button on the way out, that would be massively appreciated. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.